All right, let's get more on this. Markets higher today as investors digest President Joe Biden's exit, of course, from the presidential race. For more on what the move means for investors, let's welcome in Ralph Schlosstein, Evercore Chairman Emeritus. Ralph, great to see you.
It's great to see you. Great to be here.
So let's start there, Ralph, with politics, of course. Seismic news over the weekend. President Biden drops out, endorses Kamala Harris. What did you make of it, Ralph? Were you surprised, or did you expect this is what was going to happen?
Well, I'm a big fan of the president, and I would observe that he's been an excellent president, but more important than that, he's a tremendous patriot and a really good man. And so for probably the last 3 or 4 weeks, I felt as difficult as this decision was, and it was an incredibly difficult and selfless decision, that he would reach this conclusion, which I think is best for the country and for the Democratic Party.
And do you think that Kamala Harris is the person who should indeed be the candidate and that she has a good chance against Donald Trump?
I do. I think she is she's sat to the right of the left of the president for the last 3 3/4 years. She was a senator before that, an elected official in California, incredibly skilled person. The reality is we don't have a lot of time to make this decision. In my view, no one of consequence is going to step forward to challenge her, although they should be given that opportunity. So I think it's pretty probable that she'll be the nominee.
And Ralph, so you support Kamala Harris. Any thoughts on who you think would be a good VP?
I don't have anything original to contribute there. I would advise her, I think, as anyone would, pick someone who, if something happens, can do the job, and someone that you think will be a great partner to you. That's what Joe Biden did in 2020, and I'm sure she'll do the same thing. And the people who are mentioned, whether it's Senator Kelly or Bashir, or the governor of Pennsylvania, Shapiro, the governor of North Carolina, they're all, superb leaders.
Do you think that Harris herself will have to move more to the center during this campaign? I mean, when she ran against Joe Biden, amongst others, she sort of tacked more to the left. Do you think that will change in this campaign?
I think if you look at her career, she's actually been well in the center of California Democratic politics.
Well, okay, but that's a different scale, Ralph, to be fair.
In fact, you could even say she's been among the more conservative statewide elected leaders there. I mean, her background is as a prosecutor. She's got a very strong anti-crime record. And she's been, when she was in the Senate, she was someone who was very pro-growth, and supportive of the private sector creating jobs, and I wouldn't expect that would change. And
so when you say, Ralph, that obviously you're a fan of Biden, you support Kamala Harris, what specific economic policies are you supportive that you think are going to be advantageous for the economy, for the markets?
Well, I think if you look over the last 3.5 years, and I don't want to be partisan here, but the list of accomplishments of the Biden-Harris administration is pretty long. For example, you take infrastructure, something that Donald Trump talked about for 4 years. Biden and Harris got a bipartisan piece of legislation through the Congress, bringing technology jobs back to the United States. President Trump talked about that for several years, did nothing. The CHIPS Act was passed, bipartisan support once again, bringing down drug prices, another thing that Trump talked about, and Biden actually accomplished something. So I think in some respects, there's more agreement than any Democrat or Republican would let you believe about what needs to happen to make our economy strong. And the Biden-Harris government has a pretty good record of getting legislation through on a bipartisan basis.
Even though economists you talk to and folks like yourself will say that the economy is strong right now, the American people, many of them don't see it that way because of the inflation issue and the inflation issue alone. How does the Harris campaign push past that and improve that perception?
Well, one of the things I've been saying for quite a while, and I had I'm so much older than both of you, I had the experience of working in the White House during the Carter administration when we had high inflation. And one of the things that I think just is hard to recognize if you didn't live through that experience is that inflation is something that touches every single American. And when you go into that grocery store and eggs are 50% higher and milk is 40% higher and beef or chicken is whatever it is higher, you don't necessarily put that together with, well, I'm making a little more money as well. And gas, the things that are very visible and that you touch every week or every day are more expensive. And that's very different from unemployment, which touches, it's a portion of the population, and when you include their families and friends, a bigger portion of the population. But inflation hits every single person, and unfortunately, it hits the middle income and the lower middle income and the poor worst of all, because they spend a bigger portion of their income on necessities.
Well, is it just a matter of then acknowledging that?
I think there has to be, honestly, an acknowledgement of it, that life is harder, that it's more challenging to put food on the table and gas in the tank, and that there's a major effort underway to bring the cost of living down and to strengthen wages. Some of this, I kind of laugh that, not laugh, but, in all honesty, it's not fair to blame President Trump for the unemployment that resulted from COVID. And it's equally not fair to blame President Biden and Vice President Harris for the inflation that occurred as a result of COVID. And I think they've done a pretty good job of getting after it. The Fed has done a terrific job after they got past this transitory moment. And I think the president and the vice president deserve a lot of credit for not once complaining about the Fed. They've never attacked the independence of the Fed. And that is a fundamentally core tenet of the success of our economy.
You mentioned, Ralph, the Fed, and obviously, most economists, financial markets are going to bet now that if a cut is coming. Do you think a cut is coming in September, Ralph? What's your time frame, and do you think that's appropriate?
I do think that we're finally at a point where the risks of higher unemployment and higher inflation are at least equal, and in fact, we're now getting to a point where the risk to activity and employment is getting greater than the risk to inflation. I think inflation is trending in the right direction. I think it will continue to do so. We have a monetary policy that's pretty restrictive, and I think it's a good time to go back toward normalization, and September would be a good time to start. But we still have a fair amount of data to come out between now and then, and that could change my view, and I'm sure the Fed's.
So given that, we talk a lot on the show, and we talk to a lot of investors about the election and the effect on the markets, which thus far has not been huge. There are certain segments of the market. When you talk to people on the street, when you talk to people who are in the markets, how does that line of thinking go? Because sometimes it's also difficult to separate your politics from what's going on in the markets.
Yeah, I'm pretty agnostic on that. I think that the policies may be somewhat different. I do think we have a long-term, challenge in our economy, in that our fiscal policy is too loose. We cannot, go on forever to generate the kinds of deficits, particularly in a period of high employment as we're in right now. I happen to be of the view that neither of our parties is particularly focused on this at the moment. Something will happen at some point down the road that will cause the politicians to focus intensely on this. In my view, I have no idea what that is or when it'll occur, but it will occur. And I actually think that if I was at a lunch last Friday with about 20 people in the financial community, and I asked the question, in the next 4 years, which president do you believe will generate more deficits? The Democrat, by the way, I was one of a very small number of people who thought that the president would do what he did this weekend. So most of them thought it would be Biden versus Trump, and I put it as the Democrat versus Trump. And it was a pretty strong majority in favor of saying they thought the Democrats would generate less deficits than the Republicans, which happens to be my view as well. And the biggest,
why is that your view, Ralph?
It's very simple. At the end of 2025, we have a massive tax cut. If the Republicans are in the White House and in the House and the Senate, that tax cut will be extended both for wealthy people, and the 21% corporate rate will be maintained. And if we have a mixed government, there'll be a much more meaningful discussion about that. And the biggest contributor to our deficits, nobody likes to talk about this, is the federal income tax take as a percentage of GDP has gone from 19 point something to around 16%. That is, unfortunately, we have tax cuts that we haven't really paid for.
I want to ask you as well, the thinking around that table versus the thinking around perhaps some virtual tables on the West Coast. Because it is remarkable, this election, the coalescing of a certain cohort of tech millionaires and billionaires behind Donald Trump. What do you make of that? Does that change particularly since they're in the business world and then there are folks like yourself? How are you thinking about that?
Well, it's very interesting. The very first day of my very first job, I got the best piece of advice that I ever received, and I was an economist on the Joint Economic Committee, and the staff director had this lecture that he gave to, wise-ass, smart whippersnapper kids, and it was all about listening to other people, and you may disagree with someone, but never impugn their motives. So you're asking me to analyze their motives. The only thing I would say is that when President Trump was president, I made the statement that the hardest job in America could be to be an antitrust lawyer, because antitrust is supposed to be moored in the law. And in fact, antitrust enforcement became moored in who did the president like and who did the president not like. So you had this contesting of the Time Warner AT&T merger, which there was absolutely no basis to contest it, and of course the court threw it out. I do think that there's some perception in the world that if you're not on President Trump's good side, you're on his bad side. And so it's not surprising that well-off people who lead large businesses who otherwise might be threatened by governmental action would make decisions like that.
Yes, as one CEO reportedly said, I don't care who's in office as long as the regulatory environment is better, to your point.
Yes.
Ralph, thanks a lot. It's really good to see you.
It's great to see you.
And it's wonderful that we were able to talk to you today in particular. So thanks for coming in.
It's an exciting day for the country.